Hey everybody, I'm Justin Bohn.
And I'm Mike Val.
And this is the Bohn N Zano Zone, where we are always on the lanes, off the charts, and on the mic. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bohn N Zano Zone podcast presented by BuddiesProShop.com. And Mike, we're
on location.
On site today.
We are on location, our first ever road trip. And where are we tonight?
We are at Buddies Pro Shop
at Nutmeg Bowl
in Fairfield, Connecticut.
We took a little road trip today.
Oh yeah,
it was our first one on the road.
Oh yeah, so this is
and we're together. We're not really together that much anymore.
No, it's very different for us to actually be in the same spot. And
yes,
it's actually kind of cool as we're watching Brandon Bowl.
We're watching Brandon Bowl. We practiced with Packy Hanrahan today.
That was fun.
And so this week we're going to bring it back to normal, I guess you want to call it.
Kind of, yeah.
So last week we had story time. We had 80s and 90s stories time.
Yep.
And tonight we're going to have, I guess, I don't want to say Q&A, but maybe like a tutorial.
Yeah, it's more like a online clinic kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're gonna be breaking down this year's PBA Mike Albee pattern, which is going to be the same pattern used at the 21st annual Parker Bohn III Junior Scholarship Tournament,
which is happening next week.
Yes. So for those of you who aren't entered in and would like to bowl, visit parkerbohn3.com, and there will be an online link where you can sign up online. And September 2nd to the 7th, and it's going to be another great weekend. Hopefully.
Oh, it's going to be a great weekend of ball. Not even a weekend, a great week.
Oh yeah,
of junior ball.
6 days, Mike.
6 days. I'll be there for 5 of the 6.
And I'll be vlogging again.
Yes, vlogging. We're very into the vlog.
So you know what? It'll be another fun time. And do you want to introduce our guest for tonight?
I would love to. He is. We've talked about him on our show before.
Oh yeah.
Do we tell him what we've called him?
Go right ahead.
We've called this guy, in our opinion, and Justin and myself, the best amateur bowler in the world. Arguably the greatest lane man in the world. He is like the guru of lanes and patterns and sheens and everything. I'm looking over his stuff now. A couple Eagles at the Nationals, 9-time member of Team USA. He is a 2-time Team USA champion, runner-up at the 19 Amateur Championship, member of the USBC Hall of Fame, and he won the Bowler's Journal way back in 1991. I mean, the guy's done it all. He's phenomenal. He's a foodie.
Okay.
And I love watching him where he goes to eat. I follow him on Facebook. Let's bring him in, John Janawicz. There he is. What's up, JJ?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
How are you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, man. Just got done with work, so just gonna hang out with you guys for a little bit and maybe answer some questions.
So we're keeping him at the office.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, that's all right, man. I'm a team player. It's okay.
So
hold on.
Go for it.
One thing I want to get started off with, if you guys are watching and have any questions that you would like us to try and answer on the show, we'll be breaking the pattern down in just a little bit. But if you want to have any questions for us lined up, please drop them in the comments, and we will get to them as the show goes on.
Yeah.
So, Mike, go ahead.
I think before we get into the pattern, so we had a bunch of guys on last week. JJ, we had what do we call them? We called them Murderer's Row last week, right?
We called it Story Time.
Well, we had Murderer's Row with we had Timmy Mack, Chris Viali, Barnes, and Robert Smith on.
And
then Rudy Rebs joined us.
All the guys I used to compete against in the Mega Bucks. Yeah.
So do you have any good Megabuck memories before we get started on the patterns? I mean, you had I know you had a lot of success throughout your career. So
Megabuck
anything
memories?
good?
Well, there is one story which I don't know if not many people really know much about, but I bowled the high roller, the July event. Started in '92, and then bowled all the way through '97. And in '92, I had actually made it to the top. I think it was the top 32 at that stage, and I ended up bowling Paul Renteria. And we know that year he actually won. He won the event. Well, I shot a 107 or a 108 game at him. Needless to say, when we came in that morning, the pair wasn't exactly like all the other ones. I didn't actually to that stage. So I shot 108. So basically, I was like about the 7th round bye for him. So he goes on to win the tournament. So, fast forward 5 years later, I get to the round of 16. Well, who do I draw? Paul Renteria again. Well, I ended up throwing 2 gutter balls in that game. One was on a double, and I ended up losing by 10. And then I watched him win the tournament again for the second time. So, I mean, the odds of a guy winning 200,000 twice on top of bowling the guy in the top 32 twice, I thought that was just that's probably my unique thing that I remember probably most from the roller, and almost kind of thinking, man, that could have been me. If I was just a little bit smarter, and could actually keep the ball in the lane, I'd probably, might have a little bit more money in my pocket. But minor details. It's okay.
So as Chris Forey pops in really quick.
Oh yeah.
So here's a question for you, and you do lanes for a living. Well, first of all, I guess, before we ask the question, what exactly is your role with Kegel? So we know you're a lane guy. You design patterns. What exactly is your role with Kegel?
My actual role is technical support. So we have phone support here at Kegel for people have trouble with their lane machine. They can't get it running. Well, I'm one of basically 4 guys that they'll call for that. And also, sometimes they'll call for pattern support. They can't get their lane, their house pattern scoring high enough, or they're trying to help develop a tournament pattern, for example. Well, I'm basically one of about 2 guys that they'll call for that. So that's basically when I'm not on the road, which obviously I've been on since March with everything going on now. But when I'm not on the road, that's what I do when I'm at home. So that's really about 65% of my job. 25-30% of the job is being on the road, taking lane maintenance for the tournaments that we have our, contracts with, like USBC, Asian Bowling Federation, European 10-pin Bowling Federation, the European Bowling Tour, all those many different events, that take us, all around the U.S., around the world. It's probably like the other 30% or so of my job. And then the remaining 5 or so percent is kind of doing educational seminars and whatnot. I've done a few for colleges over the years. So, I mean, that's kind of what the other little bit of my job. But technically, like I said, about 65% of my job is tech support on the phones.
That's kind of what I took advantage of. He helped me design a pattern from one of my tournaments last year, and it was a success.
Yeah,
and I'll be doing that again this year, John, just to give you a heads up.
Yeah, he's helped us the past few years come up either picking a pattern or designing a pattern or tweaking a pattern.
Yeah.
He's helped us all pretty good the last few years, and now he's actually going to help us break down this one.
Yeah. So before we break it down, so when you just said how you went back and you bowled 108 in that one match, right?
Yeah.
The pattern wasn't the same. What is the one thing you hear the most as a lane man, like from bowlers? Like, that has to be the hardest thing in the world. I mean, if they don't bowl well, it's your fault. It's never the bowler's fault. It's always the lane guy's fault. So what's like the one thing that you constantly hear across the globe? Is there one thing, or is it just like a garbage you hear?
I can't really say there's one thing that we hear, but I mean, there is one thing though that's pretty true to lane maintenance. It's kind of more of an inside joke that if you're at a tournament and no one's talking about the lane, no one's mentioning, the left side's or the left side's getting shut out, or scores are too high or scores are too low. If no one's saying anything about lane maintenance, that's when you know that everything is just right. So, when nobody's saying anything, that's usually the sign that you did your job. We did our job correctly. So that's pretty much about the one thing that's pretty universal all around the globe and all around the U.S. and tournaments that I've bowled at and taken care of lanes for.
All right. We'll get back to that a little bit later. So why don't you have at it? This is your tournament, and you've decided on this pattern. So I've been bowling for 30 years. I don't know how to read a lane graph, so I'm learning tonight how to read a lane graph.
So
what to look for.
Those of you who don't know, we're actually going to teach you how to read a lane graph, and we're actually going to look at the Mike Albee pattern,
which is the tournament pattern for this year's scholarship tournament.
Oh yeah.
So there it is.
So the 2020 PBA Mike Albee pattern, 39 feet. It is the same pattern that is used at all of the other PBA regional qualifier locations. And, well, we obviously got a bunch of numbers.
So this is what the junior PBA is using as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, it looks like a bunch of numbers to Mike, maybe some blue colors, and then we got Christmas on the bottom. So
yeah.
Do we want to start with what we got up at the top, the numbers, the oil pattern distance, brush drop, and all that stuff?
Yep. The main things that I would probably, when I look at patterns, the big thing that I look at, honestly, isn't even really a pattern. It's the lane surface. What kind is it? Is it, AMF HPL? Is it Brunswick Pro Lane? And how old is it? Because usually that'll tell me the most, because just from previous experience, like say, for example, if you're dealing with an amble lane surface that's 31 years old, the maintenance standpoint, there's probably not a whole lot I can do to hide the right-hand ball. Not a whole lot I can do to hide the hook in the front. So I kind of already know what's going to end up happening regardless. That especially if the pattern is probably any bit longer than about 37 feet that, ball track, and you're going to probably end up playing in unless, it's very, very obvious that there's a lot of hook on 1, 2, 3. But, short of that, going into the actual pattern, like those numbers at the top there, obviously the pattern is like the first thing, I always like to look at. That kind of gives you an idea where you're going to want your ball down the lane, in most cases. Now, people have used, PL minus 31, which I think is okay. There's obviously a lot of other factors that'll move that left or right,
That rule of 31 where you take 31 subtracted from the length, right?
The length.
And that's supposed to be the break point, right, John?
Yeah. Yeah, it should be where the ball should be exiting the oil pattern. It should be like board 8, which I think is just kind of a general rule. But like I said, there's things in the pattern structure and in the surface that can, make that move a little bit farther right or a little farther left. Now, the other thing I like to look at there is in the second row, the total oil volume, which in this particular case is 29.25 mils. Now, a lot of people might ask, is that a lot of oil? Is that a small amount? Basically, that is just under an ounce of oil per lane, which if you kind of look at it that way, it's really not a lot. But in terms of what we see today, the average competitive pattern that we deal with, when we're talking about setting up lanes for tournaments where you're getting about 12 games per lane, up to maybe about 18 games per lane, the average that we see in competitive tournaments now is around 25 to 27 mils of conditioner. So this is a little bit above average. So it's a little bit on the heavier side. But like I said, there are a lot of other things you have to kind of consider when I look at you have to look at how many games per lane are you getting. Now, like I said, if this is like going to be holding up for 2 shifts, it might be a lot at the beginning, but by the time you get to 6-7 hours later, it might not be a lot of oil at all. The lane's going to probably hook a whole lot. So, when it comes to the format of the tournament, that's also where I kind of like to look at how many games per lane that you're getting. But from a general standpoint, that's definitely a little bit on the heavier side of medium. But nothing to me as far as Army. But those are probably the main couple things out of the numbers there at the top.
Okay.
Now, as far as like going into the box right below that on the left, where you've got the start, the stop, the load, speed, crossed, and all those numbers there. Now, the way the machine applies oil is basically like an inkjet printer. You've got an oil head that's going to move back and forth at a constant rate, and it's going to be applying lines of oil. And we like to title as loads, which is what you'll see in the third screen there under loads. Now, with these lines of oil, there are about 3 or 4 different things that we can control in the programming of the lane machine. One, we can control where those lines of oil start and stop on, what board. We can control how many of those loads or lines of oil that we can apply going forward and reverse pass. We control how big that line of oil is in terms of microliters, which on that very top row there, where it says oil per board, that's 50 microliters. That's how many microliters there are per board in that line of oil. Like say, for example, if we're applying one line of oil from 2 to 2, which on screen number 1 there going forward, you stop to R. basically that means we're applying a line of oil from the 2 board on the left to the 2 board on the right. And the number of loads means we're going to be applying 3 of those. Now, the next line there, or the next column, is the speed. And the speed is in inches per second. And we've got 6 drive speeds, starting at 10 inches per second, and then they go up in increments of 4 up to 30. So basically you've got 10 inches per second, 14, 18, 22, 26, and then 30 inches per second is your high speed. So in this particular example, we're going to be applying 3 of these loads of oil from the 2 board on the left to the 2 board on the right. We're applying 3 of those at a speed of 18 inches per second as the machine is basically going toward the pins. And in that column there, a couple columns to the right, you'll see where the start and stop. Well, that first load is going to start at 0, which is the foul line. And then at a speed of 18 inches per second, that third load will apply at 5.1 feet. Basically, that's when that line of oil will actually hit the transfer brush right before it gets to the actual buffer brush and into the lane. And then as you get into screen 2, where it goes into 5 to 5, 3 to 3, basically what we're doing is we're going basically from the 2 to 2s, and we're basically kind of going in a little bit more narrow, 5 to 5s, and then we're going 3, 8 to 8s, and then we're going to be doing a couple screens of 11 to 11. The load structure will gradually get more and more narrower as we start getting closer to the end of the oil pattern. Now, when you get to screen 6 there, where it says 2 to 2, 0 loads at a speed of 22. Now, the 0 loads means we're not applying oil anymore. It just means we're buffing. And when I refer to buffing, that just means that we're just bleeding whatever oil is still left over in the brush. We're just bleeding that for the remaining distance of the lane, which is, as you can see from the start and stop on that particular screen number 6, from 31.6 to 39 feet. We're just bleeding that oil out, that remaining 7.5 feet of the lane all the way to the end of the oil pattern. Now, the box below that is the reverse oil. And you can also see there in screen number 1, you've got the 2 to 2 load. We're not applying any loads where it says load 0 from a speed at 22 inches per second. And then the start is 39 feet. And then we're going to be buffing back to 28 feet. Now, going from there, that's where we start applying oil in screen 2 from there. You'll start seeing the loads. You'll see the 11 to 8. We're going to be applying 2 of those loads at 18. And then we're going to be applying 2 loads of oil from 8 to 8 at a speed of 18. And then as we continue to get closer to the foul line, we gradually get a little bit wider and a little bit wider to where we get to screen 5 and we get 2 more of those 2 to 2s, which is basically kind of like a gutter to gutter load. And then on screen 6, we're going to be buffing that remaining conditioner out at a speed of 14 inches per second from 8.8 feet right back to the foul line. So like I said, basically the machine applies oil, like I said, just to reiterate, it applies oil in basically lines, and then that start and stop basically sets the parameters of what board that load will start and stop on. And then the number of loads is how many, and then the speed. And then the 0 loads is the buff. And, in a quick 2-minute tutorial, that's kind of basically how our machines work.
So John, I have a question then. Is the old myth that when you bowl on a sport pattern or bowl on something like this, that 1, 2, 3, the machine never touches 1, 2, 3, is that actually true, or is that like a myth?
No, that's a myth. Now, like I said, it won't touch the 1 board. And part of the reason, there's a couple reasons for that. One, USBC doesn't recognize the 1 board anyway when it comes to, when they had the 3-unit rule and certifying lane conditions. Also, because USBC also didn't recognize it. Also, we're not really into doing 1-to-1 loads. Also, because, say for example, if the machine got out of calibration and the loads went off a little bit, well, now you might be oiling right into the gutters, and that wouldn't be a good thing either. So, kind of the combination. A lot of it stemmed just because of the fact that, like I said, when it came to the old 3-unit rule, when the associations would pull tape, making sure you had enough oil on the outside, patterns were legal for league play and tournament play. And that was really the main stem behind why we went.
So what are you looking for then, Justin? If you're going to bowl this, what would you be looking for? Like, you know what I mean?
So, obviously, I'm going to be bowling the tournament, right? And this is what I see from the tournament director. So basically, I've got an idea of where I want to start. And when I look at it, obviously, you can look at this area right here, almost like this little cliff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would look somewhere in here, basically. If
like
you
around the track?
Yeah. If you honestly have a higher rev rate, I would look at this area more as like your break point. So along with looking at this down here. This is more of what I look at personally, and kind of see where these cliffs are a little bit. If you can see how it jumps up and jumps up in oil. So like, obviously this is flat from what says 5 to 7, and then it jumps up from 8 to 10, and then it jumps back up, and 11 to 11 it's dead flat. So the center of the lane is fairly flat.
And what do you mean by flat? For the people that don't understand that, what does flat mean? We know that, but can you explain what flat means?
So from 11 on the right to 11 on the left, there is going to be no hold or no push or no free hook to the right.
Yeah.
So
basically you've got the same amount of oil on, all the way across straight from 11 to 11. Basically, you've got the same amount of oil, so there's no extra oil in the middle to help guide the ball toward the pocket to help you out.
Yeah, so basically your ball down lane at least doesn't want to be any further left of at least 11 and possibly even further right of that.
Mm-hmm.
So
and also probably just to reiterate, when you're graph there on the bottom, also just to let the viewers know at home, that's what we call the composite graph. Now, what that graph represents, the Kegel lane machines, we have the ability to actually measure the exact amount of oil that we're putting on, on each individual board. We can actually, through the calculations, we can actually, we can figure out exactly how much oil is on each individual board. So when you look at that graph, basically the way I like to describe that graph is like if you took a squeegee at 39 feet, which is the end of that actual oil pattern, and you took a squeegee and you pulled all that oil back to the foul line and had it wash up at the foul line, that's what the actual oil pattern would look like. Now, that doesn't exactly tell you where that oil is on the lane. It just tells you exactly how much oil in terms of microliters is on each individual board. So that's really, when you're looking at that graph, that's how you really should look at that. And, as Justin was saying too, when you look at kind of like those ledges there, that's kind of, you can kind of see where the little bit more defined areas are, where you've got a little bit more oil at 5, you definitely have a little bit more oil at 8, and you have a little bit more oil at 11. Those are definitely areas where you'll probably see a little bit more definition between the wet and the dry side to side. So, are those definitely, good? Yes. So, and, depending on, your theories of how to line up. Like my personal thing, once you kind of figure out where you need to throw the ball or where you need your ball near the end of the oil pattern, now you just kind of need to figure out, do I need to get there from a straighter angle, or do I need to get there, using more angle, going, like from the middle of the lane to that point. And then, your rev rate, your ball roll, and, the equipment you're using will probably tell you which one is going to be the easier way to hit the pocket.
Okay, so we got a question in the chat here from Mr. Jeff Collins.
Okay.
I think it's line 2. Left and right are different on that line. So when we pull this up, zoom in a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you.
Line 2 on the way back is 11 on the left and 8 on the right. So
Correct.
What does this mean compared to all the other lines? Obviously, all the other lines are the same: 5 to 5, 8 to 8, 2 to 2.
What they did there was, when they designed the pattern, apparently they wanted to make it a little bit asymmetrical. Now, we've done asymmetrical patterns in the past at Kegel as well. Now, like I said, to what degree, will kind of depend a little bit on the kind of tournament that we're using. Now, the reason why we'll use asymmetrical patterns, I know at least, I can't explain for other people, but I know the reason why we've done them at Kegel is it's a multi-fold question, because one, when it comes to balancing left and right, that's really the most important thing that we try to do here. Is we try to do the best we can to try to balance the scoring right-handers and right-handers. Now, since there's basically 5 times more right-handers than there are left-handers, the amount of breakdown on one side of the lane is definitely not even close to the other. So some of the theory behind making patterns asymmetrical is what you're doing there, like in that particular load, is you're actually putting less oil on the left-hand side compared to the right-hand side. And part of that reason is that because of the fact that there's less play on the left side, that we don't need as much oil on that side to help get the right side to hold up. Because in reality, what we're doing is we're making the pattern asymmetrical. We're putting more oil on the right-hand side to try to get the right side to hold up better and create less change. So that way, the balance between left and right hopefully should be a little bit better. Because really the big thing is, the change on the right side compared to the left is so drastic that, a lot of times it's really hard to predict scoring pace that way, because, what we've seen on the right side over the years is like, depending on how long you have in between re-oils, the right side, it can start out harder, then it gets easier, and then it can shut down again, and then it can open up again, where usually on the left side, it tends to stay reasonably stable. Now, whether it starts at a higher scoring pace or a lower scoring pace compared to the right side, there are a lot of other factors that are involved in that too. And also one of the other reasons too that we've gone asymmetrical with some patterns is because of the lane surface itself. When you're dealing with much older lane surfaces where, like 20-year-old plus HPLs or Ambilane, you've got a lot more scratching in the ball track and in the laydown area compared to the left side. So even if you put the same pattern on both sides, it doesn't play the same from ball one. So we're trying to add more oil to the right-hand side to try to get it to hold up a little bit better compared to the left. But that's a couple of reasons why you'll see some patterns that will be a little bit more asymmetrical. Like when I look at something like that in relation to the rest of the pattern, I don't think that's really a drastic, much of a drastic shift in my personal opinion. Now, if it was that way with all the other screens in reverse, and or maybe the ones going forward, then I'd maybe say so. But that's really the main reasons that under that kegel why we'll use asymmetry for some of the pattern design.
Okay, so basically, Jeff, to answer your question, what you're asking is why is it different from the left to the right? Basically, try to just even them out a little bit more in the longevity of the event. Is that basically what you're trying to say in short terms,
Yep.
John? Okay.
All right, so can you pull the pattern back up?
Yeah.
So John, here's another one. So Justin's gonna have 200 bowlers come to your event next week, roughly, from all over the country. They look at this, and they're trying to figure out, all right, what am I putting in my bag to make the trip to Jersey? Can you get an idea of how to build an arsenal for something like this? Like, know what to take from the house, 8 balls, whatever it is. Like, what advice could you give to these guys coming to bowl next week, equipment wise?
Like one thing which, obviously today, obviously urethane balls have definitely made quite the comeback here in the last 5 years or so. And, I have to admit, as patterns get harder and harder, and as kids' rev rates get higher and higher, it's definitely a great way to control the pocket because, like myself, there are 2 ways you can kind of get control. You can either use like urethane balls or you can, stronger, slower response balls, and then drill them with like 1 or 2 inch pins to get the core to lay down really quick, and then that way they'll be smooth in the back part of the lane. Like for myself, I've drilled enough of those balls, and I'm done with those. They don't do it for me. I don't get enough lifespan out of those balls. For me, they're good for about practice session and about maybe 7 frames, and they're done for me. So, I think urethane balls are just fantastic, and also if you're flying to tournaments too, as long as you're comfortable using them for spares. If you use a good enough technique where you're hard enough, through the back of the ball, you can also use spares as well too. Because when you're flying with bowling balls, you can only take so much. Otherwise it starts getting pretty expensive. But I think probably a lower flaring, probably a little bit lower diff ball that keep on line to where maybe if the urethane ball is a little bit too early, but you need something a little bit more with a little bit more down lane, like something that that'll flare a little bit less, maybe a differential like in the maybe the 020 to 035 range, to help be able to keep the ball in front of you and not have you force you too far into the middle of the lane too quick. A ball you definitely want to have in your bag, especially when the patterns are a little bit on the harder side. I'm also a firm believer when you start getting to patterns like this in that medium distance, the 39 foot range, I think you definitely want a much higher flaring ball with a bigger differential, with a pretty, like a pearl, a very responsive cover stock. Because one thing we've seen, and I can't really speak as much with the youth, but that I see in a lot of tournaments with the adults, you get to that point where you're playing out, you're playing maybe between 5 and 10, 5 and 10. But usually, a lot of times the next move is like you end up having to go to like 8 to 8 or something like that, where you have to really start slow curving the lane. Well, you need more flare to get the ball to continue to to shoot down the lane, but you also need a lot of motor, and also you need a quicker response cover stock because of the fact that you're throwing it away from the pocket. You need something that's going to respond pretty quick, and also you need the flare to be able to keep it going. So, I mean, I think a ball like that, I think definitely needs to be brought, in my opinion, when you're going to a pattern, when you're especially that medium pattern distance from like 38 to 41 feet or so, 42 feet. I think that's definitely the ball you want to have in your bag. And you probably also want, another ball kind of a little bit on the end too, or a little bit higher RG and a little bit lower flaring ball too. They start to burn up quite a bit. You have to start getting in. You still need to keep your angles a little bit more parallel to the pocket, where you're not giving it away quite as much. That's kind of one of the things I always kind of felt like, when you're on the right side, what you deal with, I always used to call it the ratchet effect, to where you start out kind of straight, you start moving in, and then all of a sudden you have to shut things back down again, because now the mid lane starts getting too cliff wet dried, where it starts moving in and it starts getting cliff to where now you've got to start playing a little bit tighter angles. So I think you definitely need one of those balls as well too, with a much slower response cover stock as well. Like 4 basic ball bag, and then you've got maybe your symmetrical, medium differential ball that kind of like that benchmark ball out of your bag, with that's not too slow and not too quick.
Like
just
to get a jail-free card ball, basically.
Yep. I mean, that's kind of your the basic benchmark ball for a lot of those. Which, that's like, I'm not on any ball staffs or whatnot, but I mean, there's tons of balls like phase 2s, things like that, that kind of fall in that category. So, I think like between those 5, maybe 5 I would want to take with me to any medium pattern tournament.
And urethane is the big one. That's the one he's advocating there.
Yeah, I think definitely not just on this pattern itself, but I think any medium pattern that's a little bit on the flatter side, balls that, like the urethane ball, like we just said, and then he said that lower flaring, low diff ball that you can really keep in front of you, like one of those low end balls, really.
Yeah.
Something that you can really keep in front of you, basically just to keep it simple.
Look at it like from, I'll use the Stormic side of it, like a hustle link, like the hustle line, and the Brunswick side would be, I'm not too familiar with what you just.
Maybe like an igniter.
Yeah, so something like that, John, is what you're saying.
Yeah, something along those lines, and then like I said, like a quicker response ball, like something kind of in that medium RG range that flares a little bit more, like to curve the lane with. I mean, like astrophysics, like on the Storm side would be kind of like something along those lines. I mean, when we're talking about like that medium benchmark ball, like I know on the Brunswick side, it seems like those melee jabs, SEs seem to be kind of in that, good medium, flaring, just solid, smooth type, reacting ball. I think that's a pretty good one. Phase 2s, are kind of in that category, depending on your rev rate and whatnot. And then, you kind of get that ball in the burn, which like a hustle hybrid or something along those lines, something that you can kind of keep, straighter, but more from it works a little bit better on an inside angle, especially something with a little bit higher RG, something in the 2.5 range and above.
So the big monster ASIM like Snow Tire, you don't need to put that.
No, and
there's no need for it.
I think that's mainly basically because of the distance of the pattern. It's only 39 feet. You really don't need that much hook unless you're more of a speed dominant player.
Yeah.
And like I said, and a lot of these, and just like you mentioned, a lot of these arsenals, I mean, they need to be tailored to the particular bowler, because obviously somebody that's got 280, they're probably going to have they might share maybe 2 of those 5 balls, but the other ones, like I said, they probably might be drastically different. But like for someone with just kind of a medium rev rate like myself, that's how I would kind of attack at least those 5 balls. And then if you can carry a 6th one, just kind of, I always like to say, protect yourself against what you're not very good at. Like if you're really not good on the fresh, maybe you might want that second ball maybe to help you out. If you're really bad on the burn, maybe you might want that, not a second low end ball that maybe might help you, when they really start to hook a little bit. So that's kind of my, generic opinions when it comes to like setting up arsenals.
Okay. So like generally you're going to this tournament, this is the pattern. You're really unsure about the lane surface. the topography at the center, anything along those lines.
Topography is a big one.
So when you look at this pattern, where do you think you're going to want to start, whether it's getting your ball down lane to a certain spot, you're going to want a little bit of a slower ball speed, higher ball speed, more of a normal ball speed? Maybe some things like that.
Yeah. I would probably start just with my normal ball speed. Now, I mean, I like to play out anyway. So, I mean, I'm probably going to stay closer between like 5 and 10 range. And I would, one of the things I like to do is I like to try to go as far right as I can because I want to see where the friction is. I want to see how far can I go, towards the gutter before, now the ball all of a sudden, starts really hanging. And I just kind of start bumping myself in until now the ball picks up. Because when you're playing out anyway, in my opinion, you have to get your ball to slow down in the front part of the lane. It doesn't necessarily have to change direction, but you need it to, lose some ball speed and slow down. And I try to go as far right as I can to see where that spot is. Because if you go right at 3 and it hits the 6 pin right in the face, like a urethane ball or a strong ball doing that, then you probably need to parallel in at least a couple boards away from that. And then once you figure that out, okay, you've pretty much drawn your boundary as far to the right as you can go. So now you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, how much hook is there in the middle of the lane? So you kind of throw a few balls. Okay, maybe if I can still throw it to like around 10 or 9, I can still throw it there, and then the ball will still hold to hit the pocket. So okay, you kind of figure, all right, I got to get it between 6 and 9 down the lane. Now, how am I going to get there? Am I going to get there going straight up 6-9, or am I going to get there like maybe farther from 12 to 9, or maybe 15 to 8, or something like that? Which way is easier to hit the pocket? And a lot of times, when I looked at it that way, one of them was going to be pretty obvious. One was going to be a lot more obvious than the other. It was going to be easier to hit the pocket when I made a bad shot. And if there was, at the end of 10 minutes of practice, if I still couldn't figure out, which one was better, or they both seemed the same, I was like going straighter, just because of the fact that, you never know with transition what's going to happen. Some places, the front's going to blow up really quick. Some places the ball is going to go straight down the lane. Some place the mid lane is going to blow up really quick. You never really know, but the less boards that you're crossing and the more you're able to keep it on the line, the less you're going to see that transition. So I think that's just safe play. So, and especially with a higher volume like 29 mils, you're probably going to get a little down, to reasonably quickly, or at least there's a good chance of that happening. So, like I said, I would probably tend to want to go straighter. And, like I said, whether that's with a urethane ball, or whether, maybe just a lower flaring, lower RG ball that, will help me just keep it on the line, I'll make that decision in practice.
I got one for him.
Okay, go ahead.
So John, and I'm going to go back a couple years. I bowled a 20 grainer down in Kenner Gaines' place. I can't think of the name of the center, but down in Orlando.
Paloma Bowl.
Paloma, that's the one. Yeah, Paloma. And they're filthy dirty. They were absolutely miserably hard.
Yeah.
And I remember, this is the first time I ever saw John bowl live. There was an 11:30 squad. He walked in for the 11:30 squad. Nobody had bowled 6:30 or higher, and John walked in, bowled 7:70, put on shoes, and walked out. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, and the pattern was just dirty. So I went back the next day, and for 10 minutes of practice, like the last 4 minutes, I figured it out, like where I was playing, and I was striking from 2 different parts of the lane with 3 different balls. Lights go on. Now I have 2 balls I can strike with from 3 parts of the lane. What do you go with? What do you look for when you're on a pattern like that hard? Or in this case, this all be pattern. If you're striking in practice, what do you look for? If you're striking with multiple balls in practice, what do you think the best one is to make your decision when the lights go on?
Well, like, I can tell, like, obviously some of this is subjective to some degree, but like, I'll go back to the Aloma tournament that we talked about. Like,
okay,
that pattern was pretty flat.
Oh, they were miserably hard.
Like, it was, yeah, they were hard. It was like, I want to say like in the 37, 34 range. And just from experience, at least for me, what I've always seen on flat patterns is I've always felt like you had to use angle through the front part of the lane to create hold, and you had to kind of use maybe whatever the surface give you for mistaking. And that particular bowling center didn't have a real defined ball track, but that place had always traditionally played better in. It played that great out. So I just kind of went with the percentages, knowing that, to create hold, I needed to use more angle, and I just felt like that was going to be the safer bet. And the fact that there wasn't really any real dry to the right, especially once you got past about 8 in that building. I kind of figured that area was just going to turn into a trap. So I just kind of went in and just kind of stayed with it, So that was really my thought process in that particular tournament. And, so on this particular event, like when I look at a pattern like this and you've kind of got a couple defined lines at 5 and then 8 and then at 11, to me, I think, how much friction you have to the right is going to have a lot to do with, what zone I'd want to play. I mean, I feel like if there's no fear of going 10, then I'm going to probably pick that zone more than anything else, which probably is going to be playing a little bit out and probably a little bit straighter in most cases. Because to me, like I said, and also referring back to what I had mentioned earlier, when the ball moves down the lane, the straighter you're going, the less susceptible you're going to be to a lot of those changes where, if you're trying to go 15-8 and then all, guys are to the right of you and more of the traffic is to the right of you, will get happening by the time you probably get to the 4th or 5th frame, here comes a 2-8-10. And, then in that case, well, then what do you do? Do you move farther in and then try to use more angle and try to slow it down? If you feel comfortable with that, I guess you can. But a lot of times you really have to kind of watch the traffic too more than anything else. Where is the rest of the field playing? Because, from a pattern standpoint, this will pretty much hold up to maybe practice. But after that, you're definitely just going to be playing, whatever, the rest of the field is doing to the pattern. And if there's enough people playing to the right, I mean, eventually you're going to probably end up having to go there with the rest, especially if, like I said, if you're playing in and your ball, your swing area is just getting worse as we go along, you're just going to have to kind of go out there and suck it up somehow.
Yeah, and it all depends who you're crossing with, who you're following. What's the format in the tournament? I'm not familiar. I'm sorry.
It's a 5-game qualifying squad.
Across the house?
3 games on a pair, or 3 people on a pair.
But you're moving pairs across the house?
Yeah. Skipping 2 pairs.
So you're going to
make your way across the whole house.
You're going to bowl across, and you're going to see the transition, the fresh, the burn. And based on who you're following, they can really blow your spot up.
Yeah. So I think a question we might have is, what do you do? So the format for the finals, it's a 2-game total wood double elimination bracket. So I think one thing that would be helpful to talk about is, what could someone do? Obviously, they're going to be hard from the beginning to get with, and it looks like they'll start to open up a little bit towards transition comes along. So what could someone do when they get to the fresh pair, they're bowling the match, a 2-game match on that pair? What is something that they could do to help their score, help improve their score a little bit on that pair? Give themselves a better chance to win.
A lot of that comes into play, like when I've bowled the Masters many times. I mean, you're basically, my theory was I was just try to set the pair up for myself. If you get 10 minutes of practice, and sometimes the opponent can have a little influence on what you're doing, but I think like anything, by the time you get to match play, you kind of have an idea of how your look was on the fresh based on qualifying. So you can probably make an assumption either, okay, if I had a bad look at qualifying, maybe I need to spend 10 minutes of practice trying to make the pair a little bit better. Now, maybe, throwing a urethane ball just inside of where you want to play, or maybe throwing maybe one of those bigger flaring, absorbing sponges just to the right of where you're going to play. Whatever that is that, makes, your swing a little bit looser, I think that's what you have to do. Now, if you had a really good look in the fresh, and you can kind of tell, okay, this pair still looks really good. In my opinion, I just be shooting spares. There's no sense of, because if you got a good look at practice and you just continue to throw shots there, what are you doing?
Right.
Creating change. And if you were striking the whole time, you're only going to create change for the worse. So, I mean, a lot of it when you get in that match play is you're really just trying to manage the pair. You have to determine, do I need to make it better or do I need to make it worse? Or like I said, is it okay the way it is, or do I need to try to help make it better? And I think once you figure that out, then you just have to just kind of use 10 minutes practice wisely. But yeah, a lot of times when I've got a good look in the fresh on a pair,
you don't want to touch it.
No, I'll get out of that zone and shoot some spares, and maybe go get a water or test some balls inside of that. So then when I have to move in, I kind of maybe have an idea what maybe I might want to go to if that picture wasn't clear already. But otherwise, I mean, if it's good on the fresh, you don't need to just keep beating it up.
So he just mentioned like throwing a urethane ball like left to where you want. So John, is that also a myth that urethane can actually help increase your likelihood of scoring on a pair, or is it going to mess up? I mean, a lot of people always say you're throwing urethane, you're blowing the pair up, it's creating carry down. Is that true, or can urethane actually benefit you on breaking a pattern down as well?
I mean, I've had urethane benefit me a few times breaking it down. I mean, I guess like anything else, I mean, you depending on where you throw it and how good you are at actually hitting your lines. I mean, if you're pretty good at hitting your lines and just moving a few boards in and just tracing some lines inside of that, then I think it can definitely be a help. Now, like I said, if I've seen guys try to set the lanes up for themselves and they weren't very good at actually hitting their lines, and then they actually ruined it for themselves. So I think it just depends on the player more than anything else. But does urethane create a different kind of change? Yes, it does. But my personal opinion, I mean, it's just another tool in the bag. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with the urethane revolution myself. There's been times where it's hurt me, but like anything else, you got to figure it out. I mean, you have to figure it out, and if you don't, then you're going to go home. And I'm not ready to go home yet, So I'm just going to keep working at it and trying to find ways, whether it's through different kinds of equipment, or maybe I just need to just start to learn to throw urethane balls a little bit more. Which like I said, Frank, I like to think I'm. But like anything else, there's always more to be learned.
Is there a difference between a urethane ball made now than urethane from the urethane era? I mean, do you see like a bigger, like if I came out to an event, if I came out with an original blue hammer, let's just say, and a pitch black, are they going to react the same because they're both urethane balls, or are they going to react totally different?
I think they'll react very different. I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, like even though the differentials aren't very high on a lot of these newer balls, like the True Motion and the purple hammers and the pitch blacks, I mean, they still do have a little bit of core in them, and they will flare a little. I mean, not really a lot, but I mean, at the same time, it's not going to be that, quarter-inch line that we used to see with the Thunderbolts and whatnot, too. Where, those are the balls that'll definitely really, create some carry. It is literally only one line of oil, and it's going to be depositing that oil when it gets to the back end. Those are the ones that really create a lot of change. But, like Black Widow urethanes and whatnot, I mean, they'll probably blow up the front a little bit more than they'll really do much in the back. But, no, that I would definitely say no, they're definitely not the same. And also a lot of these newer cover stocks, I mean, they definitely seem to absorb a lot more oil than the hammers and black UDOTs did back in the day. So I think, with the newer technology, I think they do absorb more, but just because of the fact that we're using compared to like when we were first using black UDOTs, I mean, we're almost using 3 times the amount of oil too, compared to, the black UDOT, slate UDOT days and the black hammers. I mean, we're using 3 times the volume. So, in that sense, yeah, they're gonna carry oil down just because of the fact that, like I said, use a lot more oil now too.
And that's kind of like what you just got off of when you bowled the Team Masters.
Yeah,
that's a perfect example of when you just bowled in Virginia.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep. So I mean, I don't know how much carry down you saw at the Team Masters, but I mean, those patterns are quite a bit less volume too. So. Oh
yeah, quite a bit less.
And I got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there? I mean, it seems like everybody has a urethane ball in their bag now. I don't, and I think I'm going to eventually bite the bullet and put a urethane ball in the bag. Is there a certain like kind of volume or length where urethane is just a no-no, or can you manipulate the pattern with urethane regardless of what you're seeing on the lane?
Well, I mean, just from my experience with pattern design and whatnot, I mean, there's some things that that I've just kind of seen trends. I mean, obviously, if you get enough oil to the outside, then people aren't going to throw urethane. And the longer you go, people, in most cases, aren't going to throw urethane. You need some friction to be able to get the ball started a little bit earlier in order to get urethane to go. And also, because of the fact that the balls are pretty slow, you need some help down the lane. Now, in that same breath, one of the things that happens sometimes is, I've had people say that, can you design a pattern that, will shut urethane balls out? Well, I mean, yeah, you can go longer. You can use a lot more oil, and you can put a lot more oil outside. When you do that, now people are going to start throwing the regular balls, and because there's so much oil outside, so much longer, now you're guiding people to want to play 15 to 20 on the fresh. Well, now when they play 15 to 20 on the fresh, then they run the chance. Now you run the chance of having to get in front of the ball return. By the time game 4 or game 5 rolls around, and some people don't like that either. They say that's not bowling. So, I mean, a lot of times you kind of have to pick your poison more than anything else. And finding that perfect takes a lot of work and testing when it comes to pattern design. I mean, there's still a lot of art involved in pattern design. And even though Kegel's added a lot more science over the years, still, I mean, you have to take into consideration, even if you find that perfect pattern that finds that meets that blend you're looking for, that's great in this bowling center, but all of a sudden you take it to the bowling center down the road, and now all of a sudden it's terrible. So, like I said, it's all individually tailored to that particular surface. And that's why I always say, pattern knowledge is great, and it can definitely help you, but knowing the surface and how old it is, that's still what I refer back to more than anything, because I know some places, I can't hide the ball track no matter what. I can't put enough oil to really hook from happening. So, knowing that, like I said, that's why I'm more interested in the surface and that knowledge more than anything else.
And nobody really gets that. Nobody talks about the lane surface. It's always about how the length or whatever it is. Nobody ever goes
the
into
length
that.
or the amount of volume on the lane and all that kind of stuff.
And then topography.
I can't just say. I mean, when it comes to urethane balls, it seems like pretty much any pattern distance that starts with a 3 seems like urethane seems to be in play. I mean, it seems like that's around that number when you start getting into that, 41, 42, 43 foot range, and the longer you start going, I think it definitely doesn't seem to favor all styles. Now you're mostly dealing with the big hand guys or the bigger hand guys that are maybe a little bit more rev dominant. Now they tend to go a little bit better when you start getting into that category. But yeah, it seems like whenever they're in the 30, it seems like at least around here in Florida, a lot. It always seems like it's going to be in play, or people are at least trying it.
Can I have one more before we wrap it up?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So, John, here's an interesting one, and I'm going to go to Reno. For years, Reno was always very lefty friendly. I mean, I think everybody that's a bowler knows that, right? I mean,
yeah.
The stadium was always very left-handed friendly, and then it kind of changed a little bit and kind of evened out. What made that place so good on the left? Like, regardless of what you put down, it seemed like the lefties always ran everybody over. What causes something like that where a building is so dominant regardless of what you put down?
Well, I think, I haven't seen near as much of that since they replaced the lanes in 2004, or excuse me, in 2005. I haven't seen it near as much. Now that was definitely more of the case from like 98 to 2005. Now, since they replaced the lanes, I hadn't noticed that near as much, but a lot of times, to me, that's topography. That's the foundation underneath the synthetics. That's where the issue usually lies more than anything else that I can see. Because like the home center I grew up in, they've gone through a couple different lane surfaces since. I bowled there. I started bowling when I was a kid when it was wood, and it went to head and synthetics, and then for a while, and they ended up going to SPLs. And over all the years, lane 40 always hooked about 4 boards more than lane 30. Put head and synthetics in, it was the exact same way. They put the SPLs in, still to this day, the same way. So, to me, that just goes back to the foundation underneath. The foundation isn't level, and the synthetic lane is just going to take the shape of whatever that is. Now, like I said, I don't really remember seeing any Reno topography from way back in the day. But, like I said, to me, I think probably if anything, they've probably years because they've replaced the surface already once. I think twice they've replaced it. In '95, so I think that's more of it than anything else.
Good stuff.
Yeah. You're good?
I'm good. I learned how to read a graph tonight.
That's good.
30 years of bowling, I know how to read a graph.
Well, I know, right?
Now I do know.
Yeah. So, John, thank you so much for giving us some insight tonight on how to read a lane graph, and especially breaking down the 2020 PBA Mike Albee pattern. And for those of you who are still watching and want to sign up for the Keep Parker Bohn III Junior Scholarship Tournament, there is still room. Visit parkerbone3.com. You can sign up online. Got anything else for John tonight?
When are we going to see you in Jersey, John? I know you're up here in the winter. When are we going to see you back in our neck of the woods?
I don't know. I'm hoping sometime soon. I was actually asked to bowl that. You guys are supposed to have a team tournament. I think was it last weekend? I was saying at Majestic. I want to say, but yeah, I think, with everything happening, that kind of changed.
Like an old style tournament.
Yeah. Maybe hopefully next year I'll definitely maybe be able to make it to that. But I'm not sure the next time I'll be there. But I miss the city to come back. So I'll definitely let you know the next time I do.
Dinner on us when John Janawicz comes up. Deal, Justin?
That's a deal.
Dinner on us, John, when you come up here.
Fair deal. So
awesome. Thanks, JJ. Stay safe down there, and we'll see you soon. But thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks for having me on the show, and like I said, yeah, good luck in the event, especially to all the participants.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Stay well, buddy.
All right. Thank you.
And Justin, the great John Janawicz.
Yeah, it's
that was awesome.
That was really cool. Honestly, it was like I was a sponge tonight, just listening to the amount of knowledge that I just learned.
Yeah,
I mean, that was literally. I came up here with you today. You were getting some balls drilled, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm in for today. We're just going to talk about some bowling, talk about this lane pattern, and I feel like I've got a little bit of a better idea now of what I need to do.
Absolutely.
And I hope that some other bowlers can walk away like this and actually know that they can look at a lane graph now and have a clue what they're doing.
Yeah, and it shows, and there really is no – I think the biggest thing he was stressing was the surface.
Yeah.
Surface is the biggest culprit, I want to call it,
yeah,
of how the patterns look like.
Yeah, so I think we're going to wrap this one up.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up. We have a 2-hour ride home.
Yeah,
we have to get dinner.
So we are actually live from Buddy's Pro Shop at Nutmeg Bowl in Fairfield, Connecticut. So be sure to visit buddysproshop.com. Use coupon code ZONE5 off to save 5% off of your next order.
And then Thursday, you will be bowling in the virtual match against Stu Williams. We're going to have to call Stewie tonight and set that up. But Justin will be bowling Stu Williams Thursday. Time to be determined.
Yep.
And I'll be doing the commentating on that one.
Yeah, so
unless Barnes wants to shoe up and we can go Barnes and Stewie against me and you, we'll do whatever he wants to do.
We'll figure it out.
But we'll be back Thursday.
We will see you guys on Thursday, and
stay safe, everybody. We'll see you then.
Stay safe, everybody.